here is the development at the top of the NFL draft, which isn't until weeks away from now.
Yep.
The development at the top of the NFL draft is that the Carolina Panthers had a bunch of representatives at the Ohio State Pro Day. They saw CJ Stroud throw, had nothing but great things to say about CJ Stroud. Obviously, he put on a hell of a performance. I think there's only one quarterback that ever had a really bad performance at a pro day, and it was Teddy Bridgewater back in the day.
Oh, man.
Because I think he wore gloves, and it kind of threw people off. But CJ Stroud did have a great performance. They also took him to dinner on Tuesday night, whatever that means. I think they also took Bryce Young to dinner last night, if I'm not mistaken, because they're going to be in Alabama to see Bryce Young later today. They're going to see Will Levis on Friday. Anthony Richardson is next week. But nothing but nice things to say about CJ Stroud. And you would think, well, they're just going and doing their due diligence. Unless you pay close enough attention to the details. Because those betting odds that we talk about, when stuff like this pops up, it's based on information. And all of a sudden, if you go to DraftKings right now, CJ Stroud, a 4-1 favorite to go number 1 overall to the Carolina Panthers and to be the first quarterback taken. Just 2 days ago when we talked about this possibility, it was about half that. So there is momentum moving towards CJ Stroud being the number 1 overall pick, and now we wait to see if there's any movement after Bryce Young's pro day, but I'm calling it right now. CJ Stroud's going number 1 overall. Get it while the getting's good, or you're going to lose your ass on not making an investment on CJ Stroud going to Carolina. How about that, Sticks?
I don't disagree with you. I really don't. But I still think that there is a debate. I think the debate is when these teams are looking at these top 3 prospects for number 1, not including Will Levis, I think it still comes down to how they perform at their pro day. What can they build on from what took place at the Combine? Those dinners that you're speaking of, they're super, super vitally important. And they're whining you and they're dining you. They're laughing with you. They're really probing you. And they're really wanting to see, is this someone that I can connect with? Is this someone that emotionally I get stimulated being around this person? Basically, do I believe in you? I am going to invest the highest amount of capital in the draft on you. Do I trust you?
That is a real thing. That's how part of the reason why Trubisky went number 2 back in 2018 when the Bears moved up 1 spot to take him. The story on Trubisky was John Fox had no idea who was the coach of the Bears at the time, but Ryan Pace fell in love with Trubisky because they wanted to take him to dinner. He was on their board, like you mentioned, as one of the potential draft picks. And so when they went to go meet for dinner, they told him, hey, you make the reservation at a local steakhouse in Charlotte, whatever it was, because obviously he went to North Carolina, and they fell in love with him because the name that he used, because they said, we got to keep this secret. We don't want anybody knowing that we're talking. The name he used under the reservation was Jim McMahon. And they thought that was so appropriate because they're the Bears, et cetera, et cetera. They met with him. He's a great guy.
That's the last time that they were really, 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 really good.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And also, just you talk to anybody, they'll tell you Trubisky's one of the nicest people. That's why all his teammates love him, except for Deontay Johnson, that whole incident last year in Pittsburgh. But point is, they fell in love with the guy, the person. And when they went out to the parking lot afterwards and they said, all right, we'll keep you posted. We'll be in touch. They saw him drive away in his grandma's Honda Civic. And they said, it's a humble guy. He's down to earth. He's got a sense of humor. They fell in love with the person. And next thing you know, he goes ahead of Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes and all that. So to your point, like that, the people issue and the people skills and just the social skills, that does have an impact. And if they were blown away by CJ Stroud as the person and he came off that well, I find it hard to believe that he did anything but improve his chances of going number 1 overall.
I would agree with that. But Bryce Young is an impressive young man.
Yes.
Bryce Young will have an amazing workout, which, again, workouts don't really, in my estimation, there's very little you can take away from the physical aspect of a workout unless you F it up. You know what I mean? Like your boy and Jalen Carter. Like, unless you mess up, it shouldn't matter.
He couldn't finish the drills.
Hey, Jonas, it should be a formality. It should be going through the motions, whether you're the number 1, number 2, number 3 overall pick. It really doesn't matter if you're at that point, at that place in the draft order. So you can only jack up what you got going on at pro day. Like, otherwise, if you do everything you're supposed to do, all it really is an opportunity for these teams to see you again, which, by the way, because they are always on campus during the course of the year and they're saying hello and different things like that, and you get a chance to see the pro scouts and the pro guys during the course of the season. Maybe people aren't aware of that, but the pro guys definitely, especially when you have a team that's heavy with a top talent on the team or a few top talents, there are a ton of scouts that will be there. I can remember my last year in school, it was like a pro day every Thursday practice, every Tuesday practice. It was like a pro day. And so by the time you get to this point, they know who you are. They know how the coaches feel about you. They know how the community feels about you. They know how the lady at the grocery store feels about you. They know how the person that you get your McDonald's off of feels about you. They know pretty much everything about you by the time they get to this point. So now it's really just about how they feel, confirming, certain things that they may want to tighten up on loose ends, because you're about to, again, invest in a heavy investment by having the number 1 overall pick or the number 2 pick, the number 3 pick, even 4 and 5. So these moments with CJ Stroud and taking him out to eat, they probably wanted to just go over, the grease board one more time and you see what his understanding is of offensive schemes. Does he understand defenses? Look at some route concepts, different things like that. I would be curious as to how much time they spent with him in a film session. How much on the board work was he doing in those meetings? Because I think the biggest thing is that you want to feel very, very confident and have an overwhelming feeling going into the draft that this is an NFL ready type of prospect. And I think CJ Stroud, I'm certain CJ Stroud was aware he needed to be on his P's and Q's on different things like that and not leave that up to any type of interpretation. And I think that Bryce Young and Will Levis will equally be as impressive, if not maybe more impressive. I'm looking for Bryce to probably be a more polished version of CJ Stroud. And that's not a knock against CJ Stroud. I just think that my time that I've had meeting those guys and meeting their families, CJ Stroud is a pretty quiet, reserved, humble dude. You really, really like him. He's just a very unassuming type of guy. You might not even know that he's famous or a top prospect, kind of like how you're talking about Trubisky in terms of just a super humble dude. Will Levis is the same type of guy, like very, very interesting, very, very almost like kind of like Kirk Cousinish, but I won't go as far as down the lane of maybe the Christian part of it, because, nobody goes that far down the lane as Cousins. But then Bryce Young is just, he's like the epitome of and the embodiment of what Nick Saban is as a coach now.
It's pretty wild to think that if it comes down to it, CJ Stroud, great human being, great player. We saw it. You saw it in person in the semifinal game. Was best player on the field, especially after Marvin Harrison got injured.
Yep.
And obviously, we saw Bryce Young, what he did his entire career, Heisman Trophy, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty wild to think that the entire fate of the franchise in Carolina and everybody's jobs there are based on 5 inches.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's going to come down to. Because if they're both great guys and they pass the smell test at dinner and you go through all the evaluations and everybody, you love both these guys, tie's going to go to who's the bigger guy. And ultimately the entire fate of the franchise relies on almost just about 5 inches in a difference between Bryce Young at 5'10" and an eighth and CJ Stroud measuring at 6'3". That's crazy.